welcome to chapter 21 of our analysis and discussion of Wuthering Heights. And we're well into the novel now. We're on the home stretch, really, as far as I'm concerned anyway. So let's continue. I hope you've been enjoying it anyway. Oh yeah, don't forget, like, comment, subscribe, notification bell. I'll keep producing. So chapter 21 picks up where we left off with... We've got Linton Heathcliff now living with his father, Heathcliff, up at Wuthering Heights, and young Catherine's interest has been piqued, as it were, at least in terms of her curiosity about venturing out onto the moors. So, as we continue, we see some interesting differences here between Linton Heathcliff and Hareton, and we've got Bronte structuring this new generation. It mirrors the older generation as well, so we've got this new phase in the novel. And Linton Heathcliff himself, I never knew such a faint-hearted creature. And this is the Wuthering Heights housekeeper talking as well. So Linton Heathcliff is very frail. He's very much like the Lintons. He's got that continued inherent that still makes sense, weakness and predisposition to be ill. So he's very, very different to Hareton, as we see Hareton as well. This here is referring to young Catherine's birthday, and of course young Catherine's birthday coincides with older Catherine, the previous Catherine's, death day. We don't call it Death Day, Happy Death Day. No, we don't say that, do we? But you know what I mean. It's the anniversary of her death. So on the anniversary of her birth was never manifested any signs of rejoicing, because it was also the anniversary of my late mistress's death. So her birthday was never particularly really happy because it's associated with the death of her mother. So Edgar Linton spends all the time at the churchyard that day. Young Catherine has an opportunity to go out onto the moors as well. Colony of moor game are settled. I want to see whether they have made their nest yet. So again, we see young Catherine. She's at one with nature. She wants to go and see the birds up on the moors. Obviously, young Catherine, like her mother, is a creature of nature, isn't she? She's attached to nature. She's in that kind of elemental space. Because young Catherine is so adept in nature and out on the moors, she ends up getting ahead of Nellie, and she ends up with Heathcliff, and she ends up going to the Heights. And when she encounters Hareton as well, "No, that man is not my son," answered Heathcliff, pushing me aside, "but I have one, and you have seen him before too. And though your nurse is in a hurry, I think both you and she would be the better for a little rest. Will you just turn this nab of heath and walk into my house?" That always reminds me of almost like a vampire, like a Dracula type situation of inviting someone in and crossing the threshold. Obviously, Wuthering Heights is written well before Dracula was, but as I can do a little plug for another one of my chapter by chapter analyses, I've got one on Dracula as well, if you're interested. So there's another reference here to Linton's frail health there as well. And I should have said by this point Nellie is caught up with them, but Catherine's already being kind of entranced really by Heathcliff's charm, because he can be charming when he wants to as well. My design is honest as possible. I inform you of its whole scope, he said, that the two cousins may fall in love and get married. But this is all to do with power from Heathcliff. It's to do with, it's not real love. It's about manipulating people so he can put himself in a more powerful position. And it's connected to wanting revenge on Edgar Linton as well. If Linton died, I answered, and his life is quite uncertain, Catherine would be the heir. No, she would not, he said. There is no clause in the will to secure it, so his property would go to me. But to prevent disputes, I desire their union and resolve to bring it about. So even though Heathcliff probably would end up with all the wealth of the Lintons, if he gets Linton Heathcliff and young Catherine married, then it just makes it more secure. Because again, contextually, we've talked about this before, but the idea of women in this era, early 19th century, this part of the novel is actually set late 18th century, isn't it, as well, looking back? Because we're just before, we're not at the point yet in the novel when Lockwood arrives into the narrative. We're still just a bit before that, obviously. So late 18th century, women can't hold property themselves. The law is skewed towards favouring men. It's also a patriarchal society as well. So Heathcliff as a father, there's all the power is tied up with men and with fathers, and it all works like that. So if you had a custody battle in this era, then men would always win. I think there was maybe one exception, I think, in history. I think in the 19th century at least, I think there was one where the mother was granted custody of children in a separation. I can't remember if it was a divorce or a separation, but nearly always men. I may be wrong with that. I am no legal expert, but that's just a fact that just popped into my head. But I might be wrong, so feel free to fact check and correct me. I'm very pleased to know otherwise. But generally speaking, yeah, the law always favoured men, particularly in terms of like property, custody of children, all those things. It always favoured men because of being a patriarchal society as well. And Heathcliff has been effectively running a kind of monopoly kind of game, really. He's acquiring more and more property. It's all about power and asserting control over people. Then we have a reference here to, he's still very frail, Linton, but he's looking a bit better, but it's because of the good air. And we said in an earlier chapter, didn't we, about there's a lot of stock in this era put into clean air being good for health. So Heathcliff reunites young Catherine with Linton, and she didn't realise that he was actually so close. Is that little Linton? He's taller than I am. Are you Linton? And you are my uncle then, she cried, reaching up to salute him. I thought I liked you, though you were cross at first. Why don't you visit the Grange with Linton? To live all these years, such close neighbours, and never see us is odd. What have you done so for? I visited once or twice too often before you were born. So that's a little ironic reference to the earlier events that caused all the upset back in the past. If you have any kisses to spare, give them to Linton. When I hear this, I keep thinking of the Tom Hardy version with his Bane voice, Heathcliff. If you have any kisses to spare, give them to Linton. It's got the always makes me laugh. It's good, but and he's good, but he does sound like Bane in it, which always makes me laugh. Then we have, of course, replied the uncle with a hardly suppressed grimace resulting from his deep aversion to both the proposed visitors. So he doesn't like this idea of Edgar Linton coming up. This is all for show, the idea of engineering a union between Catherine and Linton Heathcliff. So there's again a very biased account of why Edgar Linton and Heathcliff don't get on. He thought me too poor to wed his sister. I'm sure he shouldn't do this voice anymore. And was grieved that I got her. His pride was hurt and I'll never forgive it. So it's a very biased account. It's Heathcliff's point of view, isn't it? The idea there. But it does still link to the theme of class as well, social class. It does still connect there as well. The idea then is, well, if we can't come to Wuthering Heights, why doesn't Linton come down to visit us at the Grange? It would be too far for me, murmured her cousin. To walk 4 miles would kill me. And I know in the modern era, a lot of people might think the same, but the truth is, walking 4 miles wouldn't actually kill you. And in this era as well, again, people would walk long distances. And remember, even back very early in the novel, chapter 4, we got the idea of Earnshaw, old Mr. Earnshaw, walking all the way to Liverpool. And that's a long way, isn't it? So people didn't mind walking long distances. Well, to us, they seem like long distances, but they're not really to most people. This is good here because we have Heathcliff dehumanising his description of Linton. We calculate it will scarcely last till it is 18. So you've got objective pronouns being used there to describe Linton, and again his frailty, and he's not going to live very long. Then, take her into the garden before you change your shoes, and into the stable to see your horse. He doesn't say it exactly like that in the Tom Hardy version of it. Wouldn't you rather sit here? So Bronte establishes there's a clear difference between Catherine has got that connection to nature. Linton Heathcliff hasn't inherited his father's connection to nature. He's much more of the kind of Linton side, more to be refined, more pampered, civilised, isolated, all those things. We have Heathcliff also, remember right at the start of the novel when Lockwood arrives at Wuthering Heights and those trees have been bent over by the wind and the environment. Heathcliff also has raised Hareton to be more brutish. I've tied his tongue, observed Heathcliff. He'll not venture a single syllable all the time. Did I ever look so stupid, so gormless, as Joseph calls it? So in comparison, I've made him worse than I was. So he's kind of construct his own kind of miniature version of himself, but he's done even better because he's successfully denied Hareton's nature. If he were a born fool, I should not enjoy it half so much, but he's no fool, and I can sympathise with all his feelings, having felt them myself. So he's taken satisfaction in the idea of degrading Hareton and distorting him. So this all links to Heathcliff's abusive personality as well. He'll never be able to emerge from his bathos of coarseness and ignorance. We're going to emphasize this is an actual term we use, bathos, when you think about it. But the idea of, we use it in terms of like puncturing the mood and lowering things. But the idea here of Hareton being reduced to his lowest point. I've got him faster than his scoundrel of a father secured me, and lower, for he takes a pride in his brutishness. One is gold put to the use of his comparison of Linton and Hareton. One is gold put to the use of paving stones. The other is tin polished to ape the service of silver. So that's a nice example of chiasmus there, actually, if you like a bit of chiasmus. Chiasmus. That's a cross structure. So Bronte's used chiasmus there to really emphasise the difference between the two. Your job, if you were writing about this, would be to explain how that works. But I mean, I can add a little bit about it there as well. But the difference is one is gold put to the use of paving stones, the other is tin polished to the service of a silver. So the idea of one is kind of better but being put to a rubbish use, like gold being used as paving stones, and the other one is weak, like Linton, made of tin, like a metal that you can actually bend, polished to ape the service of silver, so it kind of looks refined, but it's actually really weak. Mine is nothing valuable about it, yet shy for the merit of making it go as far as such poor stuff can go. So this is really to do with Heathcliff's exploitation or intended exploitation of his own son. And the best of it is, Hareton is damnably fond of me. You'll own that I've outmatched Hindley there. If the dead villain could rise from his grave, theme of supernatural, but it's just as an analogy, for his offspring's wrongs, I should have the fun of seeing the said offspring fight him back again, indignantly should dare to rail at the one friend he has in the world. Hareton is so distorted by Heathcliff that if Hindley were to rise from the grave, Hareton would defend him. And that's like Heathcliff's ultimate triumph. So he loves this. Heathcliff chuckled a fiendish laugh at the idea. So really cementing his antagonistic qualities there. Fiend connotations of devil as well. Hareton stared up and scratched his head like a true clown when they're looking at the words that are inscribed above the door. And actually there's some dramatic irony here because it's not referred to directly, but it's Hareton's name. Where it's not his, where it's the same name, it's not the same Hareton. There was an older Hareton Earnshaw who founded Wuthering Heights. So there's a great irony here that Hareton hasn't been brought up to be able to read. He can't see the truth. So Bronte does this deliberately. Hareton can't see the truth of his upbringing. He can't see that he is the rightful owner and heir of Wuthering Heights because Heathcliff has stopped him from being able to read. That links to themes of control and idea of secrets and withholding knowledge, and we've got that here with Hareton. So there's plenty to think about there. It's some damnable writing again, links to damnation and connotations of hell again there as well. He does not know his letters, as in he can't read. Could you believe in the existence of such a colossal dunce? It's a great phrase. You could maybe try integrating that into your own everyday conversation. No, don't. Someone will probably take great offence. But the idea of it being really stupid. So you've got Linton mocking him. Have you noticed, Catherine, his frightful Yorkshire pronunciation? So again, there's kind of class issues here and snobbery as well. Reminds you of Lockwood in the early part of the novel. They mock his speech as well because, why, where the devil is the use on it, growled Hareton. Where is the use of the devil in that sentence? So you have Bronte uses this deliberate kind of echoing of this initial statement of Hareton's. Well, actually, not statement, it's a question, interrogative, rhetorical interrogative, but they are mimicking and mocking his speech. And that's an interesting thing for class difference there. Papa told you not to say any bad words, and you can't open your mouth without one. Do try to behave like a gentleman, now do. If thou weren't more a lass than a lad, I'll fell thee this minute, I would, pitiful laugh of a creator. So Bronte really, again, reinforcing that sense of difference between the personas, the characters of Linton Heathcliff and Hareton. Hareton's got the kind of passion as well. There's also, notice the effeminate qualities that Bronte kind of emphasises here about Linton as well. Like he's less of a man than Hareton. So what ends up happening is Ellen and Catherine go back to Thrushcross Grange, and what happens is eventually Edgar's going to find out about Catherine visiting Wuthering Heights. It puts Ellen in a difficult position as well. Nellie's own criticism of Edgar Linton, but he was too timid in giving satisfactory reasons for his wish that she should shun connection with the household of the Heights. And Catherine liked good reasons for every restraint that harassed her petted will. So, because Catherine is fiercely independent, and she's no fool, she expects to have good reasons for things. If she's told not to do something, she knows she needs good reasons, which I think in many ways is fair enough, really, isn't it? So we have Edgar Linton's definition. No, not because I dislike Mr. Heathcliff, but because Mr. Heathcliff dislikes me. Bronte's using anti-metaboly there, Terms fans. The crossover. But again, Edgar Linton as a character being set up to, he's blaming Heathcliff for it all, isn't it? Heathcliff's getting all the blame. So that's, again, we see like the bias of it as well. You are the one to be blamed. He's willing to let us be friends, at least Linton and I, and you are not. She might have been living yet if it had not been for him. So that's Edgar's perspective, is that Isabella died because of Heathcliff. Which is kind of true, isn't it, in many ways. Young Catherine and Linton end up exchanging little love letters to each other, little secret notes. Nellie refuses to do it, but it turns out there's this little milk fetcher who will actually do the delivering for Catherine, like secretly as well. She also got a trick of coming down early in the morning and lingering about the kitchen as if she were expecting the arrival of something. So Nellie got suspicious. Obviously, it turned out, she finds out later, the order of the way it's said, it's obviously we've got Nellie's narration telling Lockwood what's happening, and as it is coming from her memory, the order doesn't necessarily completely correspond the narrative sequence that it would actually happen in, because it's more conversational than that. So Nellie effectively says, well, it turned out that there was a milk fetcher was taking the notes, and then you get, well, she had this habit of coming downstairs and early in the morning hanging around the kitchen as if she was waiting for something. And so you see what I mean? It's like, that's how it's structured. It's structured very kind of conversationally, isn't it, as well? And she keeps things in a secret drawer she takes the key from as well. Nellie, here, you could say this is a real invasion of personal space, because Nellie turns out she's got a key that would fit the lock. Having opened, I emptied the whole contents into my apron and took them with me to examine at leisure at my own chamber. So even though that one of Nellie's character roles is really as a confidant, and she kind of betrays Catherine's trust here, but you could argue, well, young Catherine is young, as I said, young Catherine, she is young, so maybe that justifies it in terms of she's just trying to protect her, but also I think Nellie is trying to protect her own position as well. But she'd have to, really. When Cathy finds out that Nellie knows about these letters, she ends up feigning an illness so she could pretend to be ill, get Nellie out of the way and have a talk with her. And so, I know that you know about these letters. And I didn't once think of loving him till loving, cried I, as scorn as I could utter the word loving. Did anybody hear the like? So Catherine at least thinks she's in love with Linton Heathcliff, who, remember, is her own cousin. Okay, so there we go. But there's lots of infantilization here as Bronte sets it up in terms of Nellie's view on Catherine's love for Linton, like girlish vanity, like talking about playthings. There's a few other words here and there you'll see that really emphasise the kind of childish, maybe even superficial sense that this love is. There's not really a lot of depth to it. I will have one, you cruel wretch, she screamed, darting her hand into the fire and drawing forth some half-consumed fragments at the expense of her fingers. So again, she's impetuous. She's like her mother here, isn't she, as well? She's worried about these love letters. Next morning, I answered the letter by a slip of paper inscribed, Master Heathcliff has requested to send no more notes to Miss Linton, as she will not receive them. And thenceforth the little boy came with vacant pockets. So Nellie quashes all these little secret love letters being sent to, between young Cathy and Linton. So there you go. So that's chapter 21. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you found it useful. I hope you enjoyed my Tom Hardy impressions as well. Oh, yes. And then I will see you on the next one. So like, comment, subscribe, notification bell. Keep on reading. Keep on thinking of your ideas. And thank you for listening. Have a good day or night, whatever you're doing. Goodbye.